Well, welcome everybody to this 4-part series. We are all from Spirit. This is Saturday, the 4th of November, 2023, and we are sharing Seminar 3, which is called Varieties of Mystical Phenomena and Transcendent Experiences. So Seminar 3 draws on Dr. Golding's PhD research and transpersonal psychology profession, and she will share very rare spiritual experiences and abilities, as well as more common ones that individuals can realize as natural and normal. All these 4 seminars will be taped and will be accessible on the Melbourne Theosophy meetup page, and will be there for the rest of November. So I welcome Dr. Golding, and I welcome all participants to this session 3. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. So I'm just going to check that, so that my scrolling down is happening. Okay, so this is, we are all from Spirit, and the first session was on the Theosophy of how life manifests. Then we moved on from there to higher consciousness, different states of consciousness, and human being, how human beings experience different states of consciousness. And today we're going to look at how people experience these different spiritual, metaphysical, transcendent, transpersonal experiences. Those words, those names kind of all are means the same thing. Transcendent, metaphysical, it's beyond the physical, and we will also compare them to psychotic and as well as mundane, ordinary mundane experiences. And then the final one, which is the 4th in the sequence, is the effects from these different experiences, how it affects and transforms people's lives, and the power of love. So again, as I have mentioned in previous sessions, that these are sequential, but they also overlap. And at the end of the 4th one, we kind of go back to the beginning of the first one, and it sort of ties all in together. Okay, so let's begin now. So this seminar 3 of 4, first of all, there's 4 parts here. Introducing transpersonal psychology, that's my area of specialty, and spirituality. Part 2 is the phenomena of spiritual experiences, and I've made 3 categories. So I've done these 3 categories from my research and my counseling. So it hasn't been taken from other people's names. I've actually given these 3 categories, well, at least one of them, my name. And then with these different categories, I've got case examples of these spiritual experiences. So that's all intermingled together. So after the phenomena of spiritual experience, then we're going to do a bit of a summary there, but an expansion by charting and comparing these categories, and also contrasting them to mundane and to psychotic experiences. Because the more you know about these experiences, the more you will be able to say, aha, this is greater than just my emotions. It's not just my emotions. It's not just my hormones. It's actually connecting to higher vibes, higher states of consciousness, spiritual dimensions of existence. And then finally, we look at medical and scientific considerations. So part 1, introducing transpersonal psychology, is the study of mind, states of consciousness, and spirituality in relation to the enhancement of human growth and well-being. And TP is short for either transpersonal or transpersonal psychology. So in some of these PowerPoints, because it's such a long name, I've reduced it down to TP. So I asked my research participants, this was in around the year 2000, so 20 odd years ago, I asked them, what is spirituality? And I found that in reviewing all of the answers, I could come up with 6 main responses, 6 kind of categories of how people would answer that question. And the first was ineffable, and that means there just wasn't the words to really say, to state, to define, to describe what spirituality is. They found it quite ineffable. The second one is they say that spirituality exists. It is something. It is not fictitious. So they believe in a spirituality, even if it is ineffable. They relate to it in a way as a transcendent reality, so something different from our ordinary consciousness, our ordinary reality. They also say that there is a universal spiritual force. Okay. Number 5 is there is a relationship between spirituality and human being and human soul. And the 6th one is that there can be a context relating to spirituality. So this is what my research participants have said, but it's also very consistent with my clientele and other people that I know as well. So let's take it one by one. So the first one, ineffable, was hard for people to answer, for most of them. In fact, one of them said, I thought you would ask that question, and they went to the dictionary to look up what does spirituality mean. And it said a lot about religion instead of spirituality. So yeah, anyway, so hard for most people to answer. The responses were not spontaneous because they're trying to think, well, what is it and how do I actually iterate it? So they weren't spontaneous. The responses were all unique. Nobody had the same answer for that one question. And many people had not previously discussed the topic, so no wonder it's hard to answer. They haven't discussed it. Furthermore, many of them not really thought about the topic very deeply. They know, they talk maybe spiritual, religious, etc., but they don't really, these people anyways, didn't really think about it very deeply. It's just sort of there, but kind of like, so what? Okay, so the next one is, I'm just going to move this down. Okay, so spirituality exists. It is not fictitious. So here, this is one of the participants here, Elle. She was about 30 years old, and she actually had, her mom was a Buddhist, and so she had a little bit of a background here, but she still did not have the support of actually studying spirituality, of doing meditation. That's just a waste of time. Don't do it. But this is what Elle said. She said, yes, I do believe that there is a transcendental reality. She said transcendental meaning beyond the mundane, what we normally wake up to and go to sleep to. So I do believe that it's all pervasive. I struggle with the nature of it. It's a greater transcendentalness is good and love and light and all that. But I'm trying to grapple with all that. I think it includes all the dark and the light, the grotesque and the beautiful. So I kept all of that in her quote. I didn't reduce this down. And this is just showing how hard it is for people to answer this question. Okay? Even though she does meditation and she's got Buddhism in her family, which often is into spirituality. So the next one, Bill was about 24 years old. He was doing his master's degree, a very smart young fellow, and into spirituality, but also into science. So he said, okay, I'm going to give you a scientific response. And he said, spirituality for me invokes everything that is not physical, where you have the physical universe, which is all the matter that makes it up, all the physical matter that makes it up, all the different forces such as gravity, friction, all that sort of thing. So anything outside of those, such as souls or afterlife or general conceptions of some higher being. So that was how he was trying to describe it, that it is actually there, it does exist. And a lot of people talked about Deepak Chopra, which probably many of you will know is on internet here, there, everywhere, a physician and also very much into spirituality and helping people with meditations and YouTubes and things like that. And Deepak Chopra says spirituality is a conscious energy field and intelligence. So these people went to the dictionary, they borrowed other people's ideas to try to come up with, well, what is spirituality? How would I define it? How would I describe it? Experiences, etc. So number 3 was, they said it was a transcendent reality. And here they're saying that there is a central focus for it. And within that central focus of this spirituality reality, there is a God or gods, so plural, which suggests that there are some religious aspects here where there is one God, or in other religions, more gods. And then goddess, one of the participants didn't like it to be too just male oriented. And so they added, even one of the males said, okay, I think we need to add in the word goddess, not just God and gods. So the central focus also was related to having a higher being, a universal consciousness, universal intelligence, and love. So that's what they thought about transcendent reality. Another thing is that it comprises souls, afterlife, and maybe more, maybe other things. Number 4, they said spirituality is a universal spiritual force. So it has an energy. So an energy force, a life force. It's all pervasive, omnipresent, and harmonious. And this is what Lisa said. Now, Lisa is she was around 24 or 25 as well. They were the 2 youngest ones in the research. And she is Hindu, a girl actually from Sydney, and father was a surgeon, the background Hindu. They believed in spirituality and gurus and things like that. And I'm able to say this because the names are fictitious. Lisa isn't a real name. And so if you happen to read any of my books, then you'll see that Lisa is the name that I gave. Lisa's one of my favorite names, so I gave it to this girl. So Lisa says, there is a spiritual energy which runs through the universe, and I think that every person has this spiritual energy inside their body. So we're all spiritual beings. People may or may not have tapped into this energy, but I think that there is a life force that exists that is more powerful than the human being. Yes, like a life force, so a spiritual force. Further, she says, many believe that our spiritual or higher self brings or leads us toward people that we are supposed to meet and cross paths with, or places we should be. We may not know the reason at the time, but often we find out later on. Yet, most people believe in free will. That it is the person's choice to follow or not to follow our spiritual urges. And Lisa also said that she thought that she was supposed to be in this research. And in this research, not only did I ask about these various questions and their experiences, but I also taught a course on spiritual development. And they came to the course and they talked about spirituality and their experiences, and she believes that she was meant to go to that course as well. So that was at La Trobe University in Melbourne. So up here where it says harmonious here, so a lot of people said harmonious, but then some people question it. Harmonious. Is the spiritual force, spirituality, benevolent as love, a life force, energy? And then some thought, well, maybe it's neutral. It's up to the person how they use the force. And then some people question, well, are there mischievous spirits? So regarding that, in our ordinary mundane physical life, we've got various friends and associates and people in our life. And sometimes people will play tricks on us. We just had Halloween trick-or-treats and can be a little bit mischievous and play tricks on us. And so some think, well, maybe in the spiritual dimension, maybe they're a little bit mischievous as well. So the other point here is perception is subjective. Some may describe it as an evil experience, or sorry, describe it as an experience of love. Others may interpret it as an evil force. So that's their thoughts on that. Relationship between spirituality and human being with soul. And this is Arlene here, what she had said. Arlene is an older woman. She traveled the world by boat, working on a boat, and she became a social worker and was interested in spirituality. So what Arlene says is that the individual spirit incarnates in human form and personality, which she says is ego or sense of self. So the individual spirit incarnates in human form and personality forms from your individuality. Thus you come into being as an individual and your personality is formed from nature and nurture, and it changes in time. So this is how she's relating spirituality to human being and soul and spirit. And then others are quoting a little bit of Deepak Chopra, and he says, there is a part of yourself that is much more universal, that is not associated only with an identity, personality, or ego, which survives death. This is what we call the soul or individual spirit. So some of the general notions here are: soul is characterized with the form of consciousness and intelligence, and humans are mental, physical, and spiritual. You can't separate the spirituality in our living. And one of the girls had said, as an example, mundane experiences like brushing your teeth, that's also a spiritual experience. You can't separate it out. So I thought that's a pretty good mundane experience to say it's also spiritual. And individuals can feel or sense a direct connectedness. The context, so some people like to think of spirituality through a religious context, others through a non-religious, some people through a philosophical, Eastern versus Western, others through no particular context, just nature, they would say. And regarding that, I thought I would add this in. So here, what it says is spirituality does not require membership within an organized religion, nor does it have the authority structure that religions do. Spirituality is the willingness to follow rituals, ethics, and beliefs of different religions that are personally appealing, and not just the rituals, ethics, and beliefs of one single religion. And spirituality is deeply personal and not systematic, while religion has all its ideas clearly set out and organized. So that relates to context as well. So that was the responses to what is spirituality: ineffable, it exists, transcendent reality, spiritual force, and there is a relationship between spirituality and human being, and you could consider spirituality through different contexts. So let's go on to part 2. And here, I like this little saying here, or this little clip here. What does the word spiritual mean to you? If you get clear on the definition, then you'll notice yourself having spiritual experiences more often. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the phenomena of spiritual experiences. And this is the part that I find really, really interesting, and I'll give you examples of them as well. So I suggested that there's 3 main categories. The first one are subtle spiritual experiences. The second one, inner body experiences, which I put as opposed to outer body. So IBE is inner body and OBE is outer body experiences or out of body experiences, same thing. So this is my term, the IBEs. So a peak view about spiritual experiences. They include NDE is near-death experience, OBE out-of-body experience, intuition, spiritual dreams, for example, a dream of contacting a deceased loved one, premonitions, and more. Now, profound spiritual experiences were generally perceived as a movement of consciousness outside the physical boundaries of the body, or an expansion of consciousness where the self merged with other. And subtle spiritual experiences were perceived as a sense of awe and connectedness, that life has a spiritual flow and energy, and beauty, coincidences, and synchronicities sneak up on us, are some examples. So let's look at subtle spiritual experiences first. And so here I'm going to give a description, and then I'm going to give you more examples from my clients or from my research participants. So the description is feelings that life is joyful, purified, renewed. It's a heightened sense of awe, appreciation of beauty in life, and peace attributed to a subtle sense of connection with spirituality. It's being in the flow, often sensed as a realization of a spiritual flow, energy, or element in day-to-day events. So the first example is from Joseph, and Joseph was about 35 years old. He was a student, university student, part-time worker. And he came from a very multicultural family that looked at spirituality in a lot of different ways. And here is his quote. He says, "I was with my nephew and we were walking around Mom's garden. We picked flowers and they were beautiful. And just when we were turning around coming in, this patch of sunlight and the sun burst through the cloud. It was marvelous. You had to be there. We chuckled. That for me was a spiritual experience. That spontaneous, joyous, very much wholesome thing without artificial add-ons. There was a simplicity and a freshness about it, like a sea breeze, where it leaves a lot of stuffiness and things behind." The second one, also from Joseph, and this is awareness of the spiritual, relates to sensing a flow, emphasizing that spirituality is going with the flow rather than going against the flow. And he says, there is a difference between painting by numbers as a kid and finger painting and just doing it. Just doing it and being there and being happy. There is a difference between a musician who does it by reading the music and playing, and a couple of blokes in the back garage having a jam session. It's the spontaneous jam session texture and quality that to me is spiritual. So those are subtle spiritual experiences. A third example, and this one is from Mandy. And Mandy had a sense that all would be okay when she noticed kookaburras in the trees. So this is the kookaburras, the Australian bird. And kookaburras for her were a symbol that her deceased father was watching over her in a protective and caring way. So she was a lecturer at one of the universities and a student as well. And so she had a lot of stress and anxiety in her life. And so basically, Mandy would notice these kookaburras in times of stress and trouble. And these were her personal symbol and recognition of a loving spirit. What she also said is, when she saw these kookaburras, like you think kookaburras are all around Australia in a lot of different places, but where she would see them is where generally kookaburras weren't all that popular. There were other birds were, but not kookaburras. So she was able to really distinguish, wow, This kookaburra is here at this time, at this moment, when I really need to feel a sense of connectedness and a sense of love and a sense of things are going to be okay. So this worked very well for her. The fourth example, and this is from Elle, and here she's saying, I was in a deep state of grief, and I picked up a leaf, and I was feeling like nobody cares, nobody loves me, there's just nothing. I'm just totally alone. But the leaf that I picked up, and unconsciously picked it up, and I felt that the leaf was talking to me, and it said, I'm here, and I love you, and that sort of thing. She said, that's a spiritual experience because then you feel connected to something that is as inanimate as you can imagine. It's just a leaf. And it makes you feel as if I'm really not all alone. Because if I can be this connected to the leaf, then I am connected to everything. So that's the feeling of not being totally alone and totally small and insignificant. Yes, a feeling of belonging or connectedness. So those are 4 examples of subtle spiritual experiences. And if we kind of analyze those, we could say the sense of self as a physical person remains unaltered. The consciousness has not gone outside of like an OBE, out-of-body experience. There is a lack of feelings of transcendence or spiritual intuitive knowledge gained. It's just a feeling more of connectedness. So it's a sense of a spiritual flow, connectedness, and energy. Things kind of going your way, sunshine coming out just at the right moment, sense of connectedness. So those are subtle spiritual experiences. Now let's go on to the inner body experiences. And I've got a quote here from Einstein, Albert Einstein, and he says, the only real valuable thing is intuition. And we're going to spend a bit of time on intuition. So intuition is basically to know something through spiritual means, through higher consciousness means. Whereas inspiration, often people will interchange the 2 words. Inspiration is usually more to know something to do. You're inspired to move to do something, whereas intuition is more you know something that you would not otherwise know through rational means. And the premonition is related to foreseeing things in the future. And a contuition was a new word to me that this one professor at a university, who was one of my research students or research participants, came up with, and he said contuition, and that's with physical coincidences. So let's first of all go into intuition, the description, because intuition is a large part of the inner body experiences, no matter which one that you look at. So I'm taking this from the research here on in Miller. And this is a felt knowledge which evokes a strong qualitative sense of rightness. Intuition is a way of knowing that transcends reason and also bypasses the usual sensory channels. We use reason to understand physical reality logically and empirically, and we use intuition to explore the spiritual realm with its emphasis on inner knowing. So it transcends reason. We're not actually using our logic and analysis to understand. We just know. So here are some of the characteristics. There's quite a few. And it doesn't mean to say that every single one is related to a particular intuition that you have, because there are a variety. But I think that you'll relate to these characteristics for some of the experiences that you would have had. So it's an awareness of cause and effect relationships that often comes after, and it does not depend on analysis or reason. Thinking, analysis, thinking, analyzing is not a necessary component. It comes after the intuition, and emotions neither influence nor distort the ability, the experience of having an intuition. It's an opening of oneself to what is already there. And it can feel as if someone outside or an outside force controlled the individual. Often people experience themselves as a passive receiver. It just happened to me type of thing. It's not perceived as governed by the individual's will at a conscious level. It's a function of our higher expanded consciousness, and it has a source of validation, and that is reason and experience. So let's do some case examples of these inner body experiences and intuition. So the first one is mine, and this is with the coffee beans, these coffee beans here. So I was in Melbourne at the time and shopping and getting some coffee beans that I was going to grind. In those days, they had the grinder. You open up the package, the coffee bean goes into the machine, and then you choose, do you want fine, medium, or whatever kind of grinding that you want. And I've got my trolley or my buggy, and I was got some stuff in there. I pick up the bag, and I'm about to open it up to do the grinding, and something told me I need to look at this package a little bit better. And so I looked at the package a little bit better, and I saw that it was previously opened. It had been tampered with. So that was an unsafe thing to do, to use this bag of beans when it had already been opened by somebody else. Somebody could have put something in there. So that intuition guided me. It helped me to be safer. These intuitions generally are for good reasons. And so I took the bag of beans to one of the store employees and said, told them that it was previously opened. So that's an example of intuition. There's many examples of intuition where people will just know who the person is on the telephone before they answer the phone, or they know that they're going to see somebody at the store or something like that. Intuition is actually probably one of the more common spiritual experiences. And so when you know about intuitions and when you can identify that you're having them, then you will be able to learn more how you personally experience it, so that you know that it actually is an intuition, and therefore you should follow it. Now, the second one here, inspiration. And this is Darren. Darren was he was in his 40s. Darren actually taught meditation, and yet he didn't know that much about higher states of consciousness and spiritual experiences. He struggled with it a lot. Anyway, he had this inspiration, and it was about starting a new life. And what happened is, he was actually doing a meditation, and he came out of his meditation, and he had this big realization, very profound for him, realization that he could now do something. And basically what it was, he was able to now move on to his kind of new life by letting go of the past, letting go of a relationship that had been hanging on, hanging on, hanging on. So he was now inspired that he could do it, and he knew what steps to take, how to do it. So that worked really, really well for him. The next one is premonitions and winning contests. Now, this is from Lisa. This is the girl that she had the parents in the family that was very much allowing spirituality to be in their lives. Now, Lisa had so many spiritual experiences. She had many, many premonitions for about 2 years of her life when she was in her late teens and maybe early 20s. She would know, she would get a sensation, she would get a feeling, and sometimes it was from the waking state, sometimes it was from a meditative state, sometimes it was from her dream state. She would know she needs to turn the radio on because there's going to be a contest, and I'm going to win that contest, and I'm going to win a CD, I'm going to win concert tickets, and she would do it. And she said she wasn't the type to actually sit by the phone and keep dialing the radio station to try to get on, but she would be able to dial it, get on immediately, because often they're not going to answer. They've got hundreds of people going for these contests, and she would win, and she would know that she would win. And sometimes she would tell her mom and say, "Mom, I'm going to phone up this radio station and I'm going to be winning this contest." Other times she would look in magazines and she would know that there's some kind of contest there, and she would know beforehand that she's going to win. And sure enough, she did win. So these premonitions, a type of intuition in a way, she could validate because she actually did win. So that really helped her to believe in herself, believe in her spiritual abilities, and follow through on this premonition, inspiration, intuition to phone that radio station, fill in that piece of paper, put it in the mail, and follow through. She said that winning these contests, she had concert tickets and CDs for 2 years, that 2 years of going to these different concerts and getting these CDs. So it was very good for her. Now, the contuition got the job. Now, this is Gary. And Gary came up with the word contuition. So I'm just going to briefly go through this first, and then I'll tell you a little bit more. So sometimes contuitions occur along with premonitions. And these are premonitions where there's a material component or a physical event coincides at the same time with the inner knowing, with the intuition, so contuition. And these add-ons or can act like a symbol or highlight that intuition is involved. So Gary's premonition that he would get the job he was considering applying for occurred at the moment he received a letter. So Gary spoke to his wife and said, "There's this job coming up," and it was a very prominent, high-flying job. And he said that he didn't think that he was credentialed enough to get it, so didn't know if he should actually apply or not. And then he said to his wife, "Well, if I get a letter from them stating that I should apply, then I will apply." So he did get a letter, and he did apply for the job. And then again later, through the handshake with the interviewer, so the letter and the handshake was the con part of the contuition. So when he went for the interview and he had the handshake with the interviewer, he knew as he was shaking the interviewer's hand that he got the job. And later, he said that the interviewer also knew at the time that he was shaking hands that he would get the job. So the interviewer also had the intuition or the contuition. Furthermore, Gary's wife knew when the letter came that he would get the job as well too. So there was a lot of intuitions, contuitions, premonitions going on here, and it worked out great, and he got the job, and it was all very good. So this contuition, which was new for me to kind of consider it this way, although I suppose in the example of the kookaburra, kind of a little bit of a physical thing in that way, there's a bit of a relationship there. But these contuitions might be something that you consider for yourselves if you have experiences like this. And what you can do is you can look into your memory of some of the past experiences that you've had and see if any of these things relate to some of your past experiences, then you'll know a little bit more about some of these abilities that you have and that you can develop further. So an inner body experience analysis. Those I called undifferentiated personal experiences, which are the intuition, premonition, inspiration, and contuition. And that's because you identify with the physical realm and not the spiritual. You're not off in a spiritual dimension. This is all a lot more physical. So the sense of the personal self is unchanged, but you may feel an unusual energy. Something feels a little bit different. There is an inspiration there that is compelling you to phone that radio station or actually apply for that job, for example. So another one here is seeing apparitions, hearing sounds. So those would also be an inner body experience. There's some people, when there was a death in the family, they would see their deceased loved ones, or their spouses would see the deceased loved ones. They didn't really change in themselves. They were still just physically who they were, didn't seem to be different, but they could see or hear things that were not in the usual way. But there's another inner body experience as we go to a little bit more of the bizarre stuff. And this is what I call, instead of undifferentiated, it is differentiated personal experience, because the person, the physical self, feels different. And this one is extra A vision, the example. And here you identify with both the physical and the spiritual realm simultaneously. It starts out with the physical, and then you're adding in, expanding to a sensing, a spiritual realm. And I've got some examples. There's a heightened sense of self, of the physical self, and a heightened sense of the environment, and a simultaneous functioning of the personal physical mind and brain and the soul minds. So I've got a couple of examples here, which before my research, I hadn't actually understood these before. Now I do. So this is Arlene's experience, and this is her quote. It's quite a long one, but it's worthwhile because it gives such a good description. Maybe some of you have had an experience like this. So Arlene said, I walked out after the meditation started. So she was away on a meditation retreat. Walked out after the meditation started, and I was walking down a path, and I suddenly felt all the air around me getting thick, thicker, and thicker. It was palpable. I could touch it. And I felt as if I were immersed in this air, this wonderful air. And I saw lines like, you know, on an old black and white TV screen, on the old TV screens, you see the little black lines. All these little black lines came into the air, but I'd still see through them. And I saw people sitting under the trees. Some were embracing, some were just lying there. It was the most amazing feeling. The air was just full of spirit. You could feel it. And then these lines began to get little bits of fluff on them. And the fluff changed from black to gold, and it got goldier and goldier until the whole thing became a mass of light. And I kept walking. And this is what I can't quite understand. Why didn't I fall over? Arlene continues by saying, I kept walking along the path, and I felt all this wonderful, and then I immersed in it, and then I felt as if my body just broke up, and I was a part of everything, the trees, the sky, the sea, everything. And I was it. And it was the most amazing thing. So these quotes are verbatim. Then she says, as I continued on, and it wasn't until I stepped out of the sunlight into the community, they had a big community hall there, and I stepped into that, And how I stepped over the doorstep and didn't trip, I don't know. And then all this thick air seemed to disappear, and I came back into myself again. And there I was, standing there as normal. It's amazing. There's a little bit more. But I stood in the garden, and I saw even the ground at my feet was seething. It was just moving at a tremendous rate. And every grain of sand, it wasn't sand, black dirt, every grain of it was seething and shining. Golden light was in every grain, and it was in every atom of the tree and every atom of the houses. It was everywhere, and none of it was separate. It was all sparkling and glistening and dancing at a tremendous rate. Even the air between me and the tree, which I always normally thought of as empty space, which isn't really empty at all, it was just seething with masses of little organisms, all with this golden light in it, and moving at a tremendous rate, and all going into one another and out of one another and into the trees and into me and out of me and into the ground. And I thought, oh, goodness heavens, there is just nothing separate. And I could see the power. There just seemed to be a power going round and round, up to the sky and down again. It was wonderful. So that was Arlene's experience, and it was quite interesting, I thought. Now, there's another one, Lisa. Now, she had something similar to this. So two people having something similar to this. And even myself, when I was young, I could kind of see through my hand, which I didn't understand back then when I was a preteen. I could see through that. And I'm thinking, you know, but I didn't see all of that energy and golden light through that. But I could kind of see through the hand, like this extra A or X-ray vision. So Lisa said, during the course of the weekend, your awareness is heightened through this intense meditation. And so she was at a weekend retreat in Sydney as well. And the energy awakens, and you are just overcome with a sense of, you feel very connected for some reason with the universe. And I remember during that weekend, I went outside. I was standing near the water at Darling Harbor, standing in my sari, and I felt something incredible. What I felt was, I didn't feel as though I was the person standing there in front of the water. I actually felt that I was part of the air around me, and every cell in my body just felt like it was really charged up with energy. I felt the air was moving through me. And for the first time, I felt completely connected with the universe. It was incredible. And for weeks afterward, I was just glowing. I went back to school, and people were coming up to me and saying, my God, what did you do on the weekend? Did you do something bizarre? You can't see it. I looked the same, yet there was this glow. And I think it's like an aura or an energy. So those are the two examples of a differentiated personal experience that's is more an inner body experience, but expands to create more. Now I want to go on to OBE, out-of-body experiences, and we'll do some case examples here as well. So some of them are astral traveling, spiritual dreams, near-death experience, and I'm going to share one of my experiences, which is like a total unity merging experience as well too. But first of all, I want to explain a little bit about the features. So the emotional features, the cognitive features, and the physical features. And just as an example, which is one of mine, is a music dance experience where the self merges with other, unites with and becomes. And I'll tell you later about my experience of dancing. That's not me there dancing. That's just a picture of somebody else, but merging with the music and with the dance. So We're going to look at them individually, these different features: mental, emotionally, mental thinking, and then the combination of mental and physical. So mental, emotionally, when you have some of these out-of-body experiences, it generally feels emotionally like love and joyous and blissful. They're exciting moments and peacefulness. It's generally like that. And mental, cognitively, so the thinking aspect, it's extremely intense, meaningful, valued, and beneficial. This is what people are saying to me. It's not just me making this up. This is what they're saying. They're often unexpected and rare, these out-of-body experiences. So you don't anticipate. Some people try to make them happen, but generally they're unexpected and they're rare. They don't happen all the time. There's a sense of autonomy, competence, respect, dignity, integrity, excellence, maturity, and harmony. That's quite a bit of description there. There's a theme of goodness and nobleness, sacredness, beauty, unity, and kinship. Generally, they're momentary or transitory. They don't last a real long time. It's described as a heightened state of consciousness. Another way to say that would be expanded, or a greater state of consciousness. There's a sense of knowing or gaining knowledge, and that knowledge has a quality of truth to it. The typical conscious mental activity, so this is the lower mind, the ego mind, that is transcended, and yet clear awareness remains. And you'll remember in the last session, we were talking about higher states of consciousness, the abstract higher mind, the lower concrete mental mind, the buddhi and the atma, and how we can expand our consciousness to be able to know and experience more. So there's a clear inner wakefulness, a present-mindedness. It's the most basic ground state of mental activity, not bound by any thoughts or perceptions. And that was also stated in last week's seminar as well, about the pure awareness and the pure consciousness, being able to be the I am sense of self. And finally, often these are inexpressible and ineffable. It's hard to really describe and state precisely what they are. So mental and physical features, generally there is a loss of the sense of self in these out-of-body experiences, unlike the subtle body, the subtle experiences where you don't have a loss of the sense of self. Often the sense of self is more than the self. It's a greater sense of self, an expanded identity and union with the universe or parts of the universe. A unity experience where the knower, the known, and the process of knowing are one. And we talked about that last week as well too, about ways of knowing. And when you are merged with other, then through that merger, you know. You don't have to think, you just automatically know. There is a sense of unity, contact, and what becomes known is through the contact felt rather than through typical senses, typical analytical senses or perception. And it's intellectually conceived. There's an intellectually conceived distinction between yourself as knower, yourself as known, and yourself as process of knowing in some of these experiences. So it's quite complex. There's a huge variety of these different out-of-body experiences. Okay, just a little bit more on the features. There's a sense of release, of liberation, of fullness. There can be a sense of loss of contact with both the physical and social environment. because you're in a spiritual dimension. There's a sense of being in the moment, not in thinking about the past or the future, but just being in the moment. There can be high and floating sensations. Often it's described as a context or space, a sense of timelessness, and a sense of effortlessness. So let's go on to some of these case examples of some of these experiences that will have some of these features in some of these different experiences. So we're going to look at Arlene's undifferentiated soul experience, is what I'm calling it. So an undifferentiated soul experience, this is a description. This is an experience of merging with a transcendental someone, like a person, something, or immaterial all. So it's all transcendental, it's all spiritual. It's merging with that. And the merger is realized as complete. There is no subject-object separation. There is only the experience of yourself as that of what you have merged with in the spiritual realm. And this is the experience of a total convergence where the knower, the known, and the process of knowing are unified as one. There is no awareness of the physical self or physical reality. Okay, so for example, describing her grand experience, which is coming up, Arlene became one with God. So she had this grand experience. And this is what Arlene said. I went straight back to God, and I discovered to my amazement that I was God, which sounds really silly. It was as if I knew absolutely everything that God knew. I knew why the planets were up in the sky. I knew the same power that was going through the planets and everything else was expressing through me. And I felt that I went home. I became a part of God. I became one with God, and I knew everything that God knew. So that was Arlene's experience, which I'm calling an undifferentiated soul experience. It's the soul experience. She wasn't experiencing her personal self. Now, I also had one, and this is where I was at a dance hall. So I had a spiritual experience on the dance floor where I merged with the music and the dance. And I lost all my physical sensation. Like I didn't have a body, a head, a brain, and thoughts. It was that was all gone. It was like that channel was turned off. So I lost all physical sensation and awareness. And I felt that indeed I was the spiritual essence of the music and the dance. So I actually felt that I was the music and I was the dance. I merged with it. I was not Donna. Okay. And when the dance was over and I regained ordinary consciousness, I wondered, well, how could have I functioned? How could have I kept on dancing and not just tripped over or fallen on the dance floor? And I was thankful it was a dance. I'll always remember it. It was dancing to New York, New York. It was a waltz. And perhaps my partner was holding me up. Okay, but I didn't know the fellow whom I was dancing with. It was merely my accepting an invitation to dance with him at a nightclub that friends and I frequented in Vancouver. So I was in my 20s then, and a bunch of us would go to this nightclub. And I didn't speak to this guy about the dance, and I didn't want to ask what seemed to be stupid questions about my experience, because he probably would have thought that I was crazy. But it was only after decades of time in my academic studies that I now realized what had occurred and that I was not going crazy and it was authentic. So that was a really profound experience for me. And because I've had this, I can more easily understand when other people are talking to me about their experiences that are similar. That I realize, yes, that is authentic and they're not going crazy and they're not hallucinating. Okay, so now there is a differentiated soul experience, and this is a soul as other. And here I'm using an analogy. And so using the analogy of music as spirituality and different musical instruments as souls may be helpful. So consider the sound of an orchestra as harmonious and just one, but the music of the solo violin is distinguishable to itself within the combined orchestrated sound. So in this way, the sound of the orchestra is one, albeit with different instruments, but they are all playing the same tune that makes a unified note. But you, as the violin music, are part of the orchestra, and the orchestra is part of you. That is, you are immersed in it so that you and the orchestra are one with no boundaries within the music. So there's a duality where your identity with the merger is maintained. So you're identifying as the violin music, but you're also identified as the whole orchestra. So that's a differentiated soul experience, and soul as other, soul as the violin music within that whole orchestra. Okay, now this one, soul as self, as being yourself as the violin music, so you merged as the violin music within the orchestra, and now this is soul as self. And so several of my PhD research participants, clients, as well as myself, I've had OBEs where from the soul perception, outside of the physical self, the physical body and other things can be seen. So this is a little bit like astral traveling. So here, this picture is trying to show that you can kind of step outside of yourself. And so as soul, you can step outside of yourself. You can see yourself lying down or whatever you're doing, and you can also see other things that are there. So in this instant, can see the self, can see the pillow, can see the bed, can see the lamp, that type of thing. And I've had experience of out-of-body experience where I would go out of myself, inside myself. The consciousness was going back and forth, and I knew it. And I knew myself as soul, and I could also know myself as self. So it's quite bizarre. So from the soul perspective, I can think and analyze and understand, but also from the physical body. So a little bit bizarre. Now, Arlene's experience as a soul, as self. So eventually I got to the light, and the light, which was white, when I first saw it, became goldier and goldier until it got to this beautiful golden light in this great big picture window, but with no glass in it. I'm just going to go down 1, 2, 3. Okay. So she's having this out-of-body experience, and she's seeing this light, and she's within this light that became goldier and goldier, and it was very beautiful for her. And she could see this beautiful golden light in this great big picture window, but there was no glass in the window. And she was ready to just step into it because it was all so beautiful. And I felt so good, she said. And there was a high step, and I tried to get over this high step. And I couldn't get over it because the force was pulling me back into her physical body. And she knew. Oh, she says, and then I started to hold on to something with my left hand, but I couldn't see anything there. So you can see that these are quite bizarre. So she's got herself as the soul there and knowing herself, but it's still very bizarre. You've got your left hand there, but you can't see anything there. So she continued, but I was holding on and I was trying to get over this. And then I looked, and there was a lovely, very well tendered garden. But then there were rocks and boulders, and then there were lots of trees, and it looked like an English garden with Australian bush in the back of it. And then it sort of receded into the distance, into rolling hills, and then a huge majestic mountains. All of this lovely golden light was coming from the back of the mountains and lighting everything up. And while I was there, oh, just struggling to hold on and looking at all this glory, I felt this come home. And I had this feeling that I had been there before, and I just wanted to get back in there and I'd be fine. And she says, whenever okay, so that was her soul as self, and I'm going to continue on with soul personal experiences. And this is Arlene again. She said, whenever I've had experience of being out of body consciousness, I've always looked at myself and realized, oh, there she is. That's her there. So that's what she really looks like. And I'm always very much aware that this consciousness out here in spirituality is the real me. And the Arlene lying down there is just a vehicle that she is using at this time on earth that she is expressing. So these different experiences, soul personal, soul as self, soul as other, and they're quite bizarre. If you've never had them, it would be hard to really understand. But what I want to say now is, is to distinguish between these spiritual and mundane experiences. We've seen this once before. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So let's compare the two: transpersonal, transcendent, metaphysical, mystical versus mundane. The spiritual experience is spiritual energy, whereas the mundane often feels more physical or hormonal. And one of the participants was questioning, is this hormonal energy or is it spiritual? And when you start to have these different experiences and look at the different features of them, you'll be able to tell, no, that's hormonal versus spiritual. The transpersonal experience is often effortless. There's an effortlessness about it, whereas the mundane experience, we usually have to use effort. We have to use thinking, intellectual, emotional, analyzing. So it can be quite different. The transpersonal is more passive energy, and the mundane is exerting energy, much effort. Transpersonal is more superconscious, and this is more conscious willpower. The transpersonal is more a greater reality, and this mundane is more the world of appearances. So this is like secondary consciousness rather than pure consciousness. And this greater reality is more like the pure consciousness and the I am. There's an aspect about eternity in this transpersonal consciousness, pure witness. And in the mundane experience, we're experiencing something temporal. We're going to die and go back to eternity. And that's why these people that have some of these near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences, they feel so much, well, that's home. And I do want to go home. And don't pull me back to this temporal stuff, especially if there's a lot of pain and suffering in life, in ordinary mundane life. The transpersonal spiritual experience is more expansive, and the mundane experience is more less expansive. Generally, there's a sense of connection, and in ordinary experience, often we feel separated from other. It's a more fragmented self, and we went into that last week again. The fragmented sense of self in the different states of consciousness. Transpersonal experiences, things other than what's alive and here. So they don't have that physical quality of aliveness and what's here. It's kind of got that ethereal, sort of astral, see-through kind of experience. So it's different from what we ordinarily see. So that X-ray vision, that extra A vision, as some of them called it, is being able to see through things, almost like X-rays. Yeah. So here things are alive, and here they're physical, and the transpersonal uses a sixth sense, and the mundane, the five senses. So all of this mundane, all of this is all fine, etc. But when we also experience and develop spiritual development on our sixth sense, and understand that we can have a sense of connection, and that we can have greater consciousness, and often it's a feeling of effortlessness, and we can sense a spiritual energy, then we can start analyzing our experiences. Oh, this is okay. This is good to be able to have these expansive sense of consciousness and spiritual experiences. So let's do a little summary here. The metaphysical sensation and non-rational ways of knowing are distinguishing features between spiritual and mundane experience. Now let's go on to, this is a little bit of a summary, but it's also kind of expanding, charting and comparing these profound spiritual experiences, the inner body and the outer body. So the undifferentiated soul experience, a differentiated soul experience, soul as other, soul as self, and the differentiated soul personal experience. So these are soul, soul as other, soul as self. This is soul personal, where you know both and you can see both. So the undifferentiated soul experience, you identify with the spiritual realm, but not the physical realm. And you're contacting a transcendental someone, something, like the trees and the bushes and the mountains, the music, the waltz, or an immaterial all, where Arlene connected with the immaterial alls, such as God, and knew why the planets were in the sky and that. It's non-dual. There's no subject or object. It's just a unity experience. There is a self-referral awareness. Conscious is not directed toward anything, or not aware of anything outside of itself. So this is a little bit like where I was the music and the waltz, and I didn't realize that I had a physical body. So knowledge is through or within the experience. It's not indirect through the rationale, through the lower mind. And it's outside of time and space, rather it's a context. You don't experience time and space, it's just not there. The differentiated soul experience, soul as other, this is where the identity as the spiritual other within the spiritual realm, but not the physical. Oops. Self-referral awareness and awareness of other. So you know who you are, what you are, and you also know soul as something other. And an example, identifying as violin music within the whole orchestra, and then it's also direct knowledge. So soul as self, a near-death experience, for example. So identity as soul with a spiritual realm, but not the physical. And the soul distinguishes itself as different from and separate to other spiritual phenomena. So it knows itself in the spiritual realm, and it knows the other things as different from it. And soul can acquire knowledge through its intellectual processing rather than direct contact. And I don't think that I put it in here, but in Arlene's near-death experience, she was actually using her soul intelligence and her soul mind, talking to these other people, these other entities in the spiritual realm. So that was another interesting aspect. A differentiated soul personal experience, an example can be astral traveling. So the soul knows the self, the higher self is soul. It knows the spiritual realm, the physical self, and the physical realm. So it knows it all. It's kind of like the pure witness and the reflected witness kind of knowing all of it together. So the personal self can be aware of the soul and the spiritual realm, but is predominantly a soul experience. And the soul can acquire knowledge through its intellectual processing rather than, or in addition to, direct contact. So I've had experiences like this where I've come out of the body, I've been able to see myself, I've been able to understand that that's my physical body down there. My physical body has been able to see the spiritual, to be able to understand it. It's quite bizarre, quite interesting, and not scary. It wasn't scary. It was just, I suppose, bizarre back then, but now I take it for granted. Note that I have these very often. So now classifications of OBE, undifferentiated soul experience, are non-dual soul experiences of spirituality, where like a chameleon, you take on the essence of the spiritual phenomena encountered. The differentiated soul is a spiritual self within the spiritual dimension. Differentiated soul experience, soul is other spiritual essence within the spiritual dimension. And the differentiated soul personal experiences are primarily experiences of the soul, but the soul and personal self can be aware of one another. So these ones are more profound spiritual experiences. And the participants in the research and clientele value these out-of-body experiences as much as, if not more, the inner body experiences. They do value the premonitions and the intuitions as well, but these ones they value as understanding that there's more to life than just the physical dimension. So, summary of the IBE. What does the word spiritual mean to you? If you get clear on the definition, you'll notice yourself having spiritual experiences more often. So IBEs are experiences of expanded consciousness within the personal self, where the sense of personal self remains, but direct knowledge is realized. And within the atypical or heightened IBEs, the sense of self and the environment may also incur various levels of spiritual energy, where physical matter takes on an ethereal-like quality. So we'll contrast them. Whereas OBEs more often tend to emerge from non-waking states of consciousness, IBEs tend to emerge during full waking consciousness. Since typical IBEs compared to OBEs are more common, people can more readily learn to detect them and their significance through studying their own numerous experiences, their past ones and their current ones. And all of the different kinds of OBEs and IBEs encompass metaphysical experiences of expanded or altered states of consciousness, upon which or within non-rational, so that's intuitive, ways of knowing are evident. And the metaphysical sensation and non-rational ways of knowing are distinguishing features between spiritual versus mundane experience. Okay. Spiritual versus psychotic. So the experience of soul is different from the ego or mental cognition, visualization or imagination, psychotic experiences of hallucination. So individuals knowledgeable about imagination, hallucination, psychedelic drug experiences distinguish these from spiritual experiences. Previous research, sometimes hallucinations were called spiritual experiences, sometimes they were called mental disorders. Spiritual experiences are usually momentary, psychotic experiences usually are longer in duration. And the knowledge and the effects from the spiritual experiences are generally valuable and beneficial. And beliefs from the psychotic experiences are not valued. And as we go into the next little section, this will clear up some of this as well. So let's go into the medical and scientific considerations. So the sixth sense and clairvoyance. The future of medicine. So this is a quote from Dr. Judith Orloff. I've taken a lot of her quotes as a physician. The future of medicine lies in the integration of intuition and technological advancement, the wedding of heart and mind. Too many in healthcare have sadly lost sight of this, a blindness that dictates in traditional psychiatry, for example, that claims of sixth sense and clairvoyance be written off as psychotic delusion or fraud. Okay, and this is what she was taught in medical school at the University of Southern California. It was still the standard for medical practice, and it's still the standard for medical practice today. So, but this was around 20 odd years ago. Probably still is for a lot of people in medicine. So a healing energy. Your practitioner may be extremely competent, have knowledge and kindness. Some, however, possess an additional quality that sets them apart. They can transmit healing energy through their presence and touch. And for myself, I've actually taken courses on healing touch. So I understand some of the processes there. The intuitive versus the psychotic voice. What Judith says here is psychotic voices are cruel, paranoid, and destructive. For example, hide in the closet with a gun, the paranoid voice would say. Or that man is a threat, kill him. And I've had clients that were had psychotic voices that would say, you have to kill your mother. So luckily this person got the help and overcame that. But these psychotic voices can be very, very destructive. Whereas the intuitive voice, in its neutrality or compassion, is always protective of who you are. So this is scientific research that is stating that. Ghosts or apparitions. There is nothing supernatural about sensing those who are gone. However, don't assume that being on the other side makes anyone smarter or more powerful than you. They just don't have the physical bodies. So Aunt Martha is Aunt Martha here or there. And she says relationships do continue. So that's very pleasing and comforting for a lot of people that have got deceased ones, especially that have recently died. And on dying, dementia, and the spirituality, Judith says, as Judith's father was becoming close to death, she saw him talk to deceased people. And she asked her dad, who are they? And he said, this is Mr. and Mrs. Bloom are not from here. They are dead. And there's other research as well that have looked at people that are in palliative care and about to cross over. And many of them see people who are there waiting for them, helping them to pass over the next few days. So people close to death and those that aren't necessarily close to death can often see those that have passed over, and they realize that they have passed over. Okay, a best friend about to die, again from Judith. The night before Judith's dad's best friend died, he, which is Judith's dad, stated, there she is, it's Elizabeth. She's wearing a black mourning shroud, sitting in my armchair. He'd seen her as she was about to pass on, a good friend coming to say goodbye. And another one, actually, it was Lisa, one of my research participants. She often had experiences like this where she could see people that were about to die. And these were even some of her father, who was a surgeon, his patients that were about to die. And it was verified the next day, yes, They went to the hospital, and he had died. And she actually had said this to her mom, and before the person died, and then the person did die. So her premonitions were verified. So she had premonitions of death as well. The physical body intuits. So the body can intuit danger before it hits. And this is from Dr. Dean Radin, University of Nevada in USA. So it says, measures of physiological responses of subjects, of people, when viewing randomly ordered slides of calming versus violent. So violent slides or calming slides show that seconds before seeing the violent images, the subject's heart rates and respirations dramatically increased versus calm slides and no bodily change. So this is where the body intuits as well. We need to listen to the body. We need to sense that as well. So sometimes people will have hair standing up at the back of the neck. Some people will talk a little bit about a gut feeling. Some people feel a little bit of a sense of coldness coming over themselves, or they might even feel coldness in the air. So these examples that I'm giving you are only some of the examples. There's many, many more. And I had to just reduce it down to this amount as examples. So here's a couple of books that this one was really good. This fellow here was totally scientific, didn't believe in spirituality until he had an experience that almost killed him, and he couldn't analyze it through any other means until he came to the conclusion there is spirituality and there are spiritual dimensions of existence. So the finale here, which I probably raced through this seminar because there was so much to put in it, I introduced transpersonal psychology and spirituality, what it means from a transpersonal perspective, the phenomena of spiritual experiences, how people experience them, the different features and case examples. I was comparing them and contrasting them, and also contrasting them to mundane and psychotic experiences, and then the medical and scientific considerations. So that was probably a real lot to get to, and we've maybe gone over time a little bit here. The next seminar is on effects and transformations from some of these spiritual experiences and the power of love. So I want to say thank you very much for coming to this, and we can open now for questions.
So please, we invite you to ask any questions, or maybe you have a comment. Maybe you've had a spiritual expansive experience yourself and would like to share. We'll take this for another 10 minutes. So the question is, how can we obtain the recording of our sessions? So the sessions have all been being recorded, and they're on the Melbourne Theosophical Society meetup page to answer that question. And they'll be available for the month of November. Well, so Donna, I feel that being a member of the Theosophical Society, a lot of our members have had these spiritual expansive experiences. I've had several during my lifetime, and I feel often when I'm present in my vehicle going through the mundane life, I have this feeling sometimes that it's inadequate. That I feel like I want to break through the vehicle because it's just so mundane. And when you feel these expansive experiences, you really get a sense of how limiting and boring and confined this vehicle is that we have. That's just my experience. And even if I'm having positive experiences, I feel like that it's not enough when you've had these expansive experiences. So that's just my personal observation.
You're not alone. Many others have said the same thing.
good.
Yes, yes, you're not alone on that.
It's like when we're having a positive experience, I feel like I should be happier, or I should be feeling more accepting, you know, but there's just that feeling of, yeah, limiting ability. Yeah. Mm.
Yep, yep, for sure. Yeah. Sheila?
Sheila?
Yeah, can I suggest one thing to you, Gunul? When you're having that feeling, I think asking the question, who is experiencing this, will get to the bottom of your thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I know I went through this quite fast because there was so much in there. I was only going to put I wasn't going to put the medical and scientific thing considerations in, but I thought that helps to substantiate it, give it more credibility as well. So I think that if you can look through and pause the screens to see some of those descriptions and definitions, then you can apply that to yourself or to the people that you know that have had some of these kind of experiences, and be able to understand that this is normal and natural. People have these experiences and they're not going crazy.
Mm.
Yes.
Joe,
Just wanted to thank you, Donna, for that very comprehensive research that you've done, and you know, putting it all into sort of understandable or explained classifications. I personally have had sort of spiritual experiences, and it's good to see it corroborated by your study. So thank you for that. And yeah, I feel that oneness at times with everything. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's good to see some of your respondents describe so well that feeling of connection with everything.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because in my research and even in my practice as a psychologist, where I did traditional psychology as well as the transpersonal, I never found any books or journals that actually gave many descriptions and examples of these variety of ways that we can experience these different dimensions of spirituality. And so when we look at the different states of consciousness and kind of like, is this more just intuition? Are we using our lower mind, our higher mind? Are we actually getting more to the will, the spiritual will that's coming in, inspiration in that? So that's why I've done it in a variety of ways of trying to describe, to give examples, to contrast and compare with one another, with the mundane and with psychotic. And I know there was kind of overlap there, but it's because there isn't much out there for people to read about this that I've seen anyways, then it at least gives real life experiences from people in Australia and Canada that have experienced these and lived to tell about it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you once again, Donna. It was awesome.
Oh, thank you, Margaret.
So I'd just like to say what was good for me today from this talk. I'm able to put my experiences a little bit more into, well, the word is context.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can I've had various experiences, different ones. Some of them very, very sort of profound, and others perhaps not so profound, but still had this sense of this beautiful feeling. And so just quickly, with the context, I now see that those experiences were in a context, which is a different context to my everyday mundane life. But then in my head straight away, I think, oh no, they're not separate. Everything's connected and interconnected. I know that. So when I'm talking, this is terminology, of course, context is the word. And so we have to use terminology to sort of to try and describe things. I don't want to separate the two, but we are living in a physical body, in a physical world, in mundane context.
Yeah.
I can also, at times, if I'm very aware and quickly catch myself, say, okay, this is frustrating me in this life, but I know there's this other context which is okay and beautiful and loving and compassionate, and try and bring that into my being. But to do it, then I have to move into sort of a passive state and not be judgmental one way or the other. And then I can feel a little bit more at peace with what is going on, and a bit more compassionate, and a little bit more love. But that's just, it's hard to put everything into words as a result of your talk. And your work is absolutely incredible. And we are so lucky
Oh, thank you.
to be able to listen to you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. If you remember from last week as well, if for those that saw it last week or can look at it, there was one quote that I gave from, I forget who the person was, but it was about the logo I and the faux hat and the loving force that's coming through, that is wisdom and stuff like that. The more that we can feel that loving force from pure source, as loving, as peaceful, as joyous, as creative, those kind of qualities, that the more that we can feel that and incorporate that into our mundane experience, the more likely we are going to have a joyful life.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to say in different words. Thank you.
Just when I was studying transpersonal art therapy, Stanislav Grof, I remember, had some very interesting books about spiritual emergence and that whole marrying of the spiritual experience and when it can become psychotic episodes. So Stanislav Grof has a lot of literature that I would recommend. And I also found that when I was doing transpersonal art therapy with a client or somebody, the amazing level of consciousness that would come through an artwork, that art can so connect with somebody else's subconscious, but also what's happening from a holistic point of view. And to unpack that for somebody is just, it's a tremendous gift.
Absolutely. And when we looked at those subtle spiritual experiences and the one of the paint by numbers or the finger painting, if you're doing your art and just allowing it to come through and to be able to get to subconscious mind, superconscious, etc. And if you're doing therapy work, especially with children, they often more easily can kind of go into that. But artwork is a very good means for being able to expand the mind and bring out what needs to be brought out.
Yes, Stanislav Grof's work and his wife, Christina Grof, very interesting. But his research is, I mean, his work's incredible, but it's drug-related research. He goes into the experiences, with the drugs and the the psychotic episodes.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a reality. I've looked at their work, he and his wife's work, and some of it is in my work too. But I think what you're presenting with us today is now I'm not sure of the correct term, but this is something that we can experience through our everyday realities, but also
That's right.
yeah, but also it can happen at extreme times of pain. If people are in incredible pain,
Yes.
it can put you into another space. Whereas what I'm
Yes.
trying to say is these are examples from everyday life. Whereas, and Groff's work, he's a psychiatrist, so he's pretty up there. His research has been through the drug-related experiences. But yeah, really interesting reading.
Yeah. Yes, people can be in a very emotional state. And I didn't put the example on there, but one of the participants was in a hysterical emotional state. And she didn't know why she was. There was no reason for her to be, but she knew that she was in this hysterical state. And she wanted to speak to somebody. And it was a person that she hadn't spoken to in 6 months. And she was she said she was lying on the floor crying and upset and hysterical, and she wanted to phone, but she was just lying there hysterical and her hand was near the phone. Next thing you know, the phone rings and the person calls her after 6 months. And that, so there's so there she's having a hysterical, hard, difficult experience, and then was able to, well, she considered it a spiritual experience, sort of like sending, like mental telepathy, kind of sending the message, needing that to happen and bringing it to her. So
yeah,
so
sometimes it's hard to understand why hysterical experiences have such a negative connotation applied to them in many cases. You know, I think this is just my own thinking that hysterical states, we experience them because of a reason. And obviously there was a high connection going on somehow
yes,
with
yes,
her and the other person. So an
yes,
hysterical state puts you out of a rational space.
yeah,
Why?
yeah,
You know, it's a shame it's all has this negative connotation on it all the time. Or not all the time, but, you know, usually. Especially women who are hysterical. Men think they're off the planet. Well, maybe they are for a good reason. Something else. Sorry.
Okay. Any last comments or questions for Donna? Because I think we'll have to wrap this up because it's 1:45 soon. So just to mention, so seminar 4 is not next week. It will be on Saturday, the 18th of November at 11 o'clock. And I will do another email to make sure that people are available, and just, you know, three days before the 18th, I'll send out a reminder.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much,
you.
Donna.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank
Travel
you.
Bye,
well.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Donna, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Donna.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.